podcast from Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. The China Expert Series is here to educate and celebrate mistakes made by foreign investors whilst doing business in China. It includes personal stories from the China experts on the challenges they've experienced in the market, how they've overcome them, and what pieces of advice they can share with those of you who are just starting out. My name is Christina Kohler-Coluccia, and I'm a Hong Kong-born European with over 20 years experience in helping foreign investors enter the China and Hong Kong market. My mission is to help foreign investors, leaders, entrepreneurs avoid the most common obstacles that they encounter along their China business journey for them to accelerate their profitability. I hope you enjoy the episode. Everybody, welcome back to another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about employer of record, which is a fantastic market entry service tool that foreign investors can use when going into the China and the Hong Kong market. So before Claire starts bringing in the most frequently asked questions we get from our clients, I thought I would just explain what is the employer of record. So a lot of clients approach us with the idea that they are not fully yet committed to the Chinese market. And in fact, they struggle to understand how much capital they're going to need, who from their headquarters is going to be a part of the organization in China, and they want to move forward with their China journey, but they need people on the ground, but they don't want to set up an entity. And usually it's kind of a conflict within the board of directors on how do we push forward without committing 100% to the market. So the employer of record is a fantastic business model, if you will, where you can utilize an entity that's already registered in China that has the capability to hire people to act as the employer of record for anybody that you want to hire on the ground in China. Basically, how it would work is that you have this intermediary sign a very basic service agreement with you in your home office, and this company then in China employs all of the people that you choose to be part of your team, and they become responsible for those employees. Like I said, it is a really fast approach to building up your business in China without fully committing to the market. Does that make sense, Claire? Have I kind of...
Definitely. So why would you, I guess, why you do that over not doing it yourself? I guess, completely, yeah.
So I think the issue is that, there's still this hesitancy with China. The media doesn't talk very nicely about China. So I think most companies are trying to figure out solutions where they don't have to fully commit to a market, but still do what they need to do in order to understand whether the market is whether China or Hong Kong are the proper markets for them, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think it is or has been made very clear over COVID that with the borders having been shut down or quarantine regulations having been put in place, people weren't traveling as easily. And there was this realization that we really need people on the ground that are representing our company to be able to scale up and grow. And also to act as representatives with third parties, right? If you're working with, I don't know, an e-commerce provider and a marketing provider, it's better to have somebody on the ground representing you who can actually visit these people face to face, have meetings, and discuss.
Be there in person, definitely.
Be there in person, exactly. So that's, and then, I think the other aspect is just, you've got to invest capital into a company in China. And who really wants to do that if they're not sure? And then obviously the issue is if you realize through your testing phase that China's not the appropriate market, you have to liquidate that company to exit, and it becomes just a bureaucratic mess, if you will.
Yeah, okay. So are there any other benefits of doing that, to using an EOR in China?
I think it's also just fast. Right? I mean, depending on the EOR provider you're utilizing, you can provide, you can work with EO providers that will do the recruitment process to help you find the right people and then
So like
hire
the
these
whole
people
process from beginning to
from beginning
end.
to end so that they can recruit them and then also hire them. This is
Okay.
something that Woodburn actually does with a headhunting partner. We collaborate together on these projects to recruit people and then to employ these people immediately. Um, and it's fast, right? I mean, to set up a company in China will take at least 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Whereas, you need the person to sign an employment contract and then they're immediately hired by the company that is there, right? They're
Yeah.
signing a standard employment contract with the terms and details
Yeah. So it's
and
quite a quick turn, it
a
can
quick
be quite a
turnaround.
quick turnaround. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. But then I'm guessing there are also, like with everything, some downsides to this. There's some negatives, I guess, that can
I
come
mean,
with
yeah,
having
I
it.
mean, with every business model that you set up, there's going to be trade-offs, right? So
Yeah.
I think one of the trade-offs to this business model is the fact that it's really hard to convince employees or candidates to accept this type of business model. For them, it's like, I'm being interviewed by company XYZ, but I'm not going to be hired by company XYZ. And and then it's
I
this
guess it
temptation of like, what, like, why should I work with you? Like, what's like, if you have no long-term vision, why
it
should
doesn't feel like necessarily there's that commitment there. Like,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And then, the questions come, well, how do I grow in your company if you don't have a company there? How do what's my motivation ultimately,
Yeah.
right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think ultimately it gives a bit of a sense of instability. Now, obviously, in the recruitment phase, you can do a lot of blah, blah. You can say, listen, if you hit certain KPIs, that will then push us to set up a company, or if we see XYZ materializing within the market, we will then set up a company. But, we need to be convinced that there is a real potential for us in the market, right? I think another side to this that I hadn't mentioned earlier is that it does take 3 to 6 months to set up a company. So this business model can also be utilized for companies that are um, let's say, starting the process of incorporation,
Yeah.
but whoopsie daisies, they've met somebody they don't want to let go of, right? Now,
Yeah. They want
you
to
can
keep hold of
decide,
them.
exactly, you want to keep hold of them. Now, you can decide, listen, we'll just pay them from our headquarter into their Chinese bank account. Now, you can do that, but there are Forex controls that are occurring, whereby depending on the level of salary that person's getting, they might not be able to exchange that foreign currency into renminbi. And you cannot remit renminbi into a personal account from abroad. It can only go from a corporate account to a corporate account. So
Okay.
there are certain limitations. Plus, what happens if you don't like the person after 2, 3 months and you haven't had a proper employment relationship? You might think that it's easy to get out of that relationship, but they could easily lose face and take you to labor arbitration and be like, I've been hired
Yes.
by company XYZ and now they're letting me go, and then you're blacklisted. I mean, that's the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I was going to ask actually. So obviously there's a process for EOR, and you were saying there about that, but I'm guessing things like taxes and social security isn't covered when you kind of do it yourself and you just pay it into their bank. So
Absolutely. You're kind of
so
sending a lump sum and I've
hoping for the best.
and you're hoping for the best. But then I've even had companies who don't even think about signing kind of like a freelance agreement at a minimum to kind of just say, listen, we're paying you a lump sum for the work you're doing for us, but you're responsible for your taxes and your social insurance,
Yes.
right? Put the
Yeah,
liability on them, right? At least have something in
definitely.
writing. But
Yeah,
they do things by email and they assume that's a written how do you say it?
like a contract.
A written informal written contract, but it's not, right? You can't take an
No.
email to court. If you're
No.
going to court.
I But with EOR, like as a provider, like how would that process look for you? So obviously, if you were doing it on your own, and that's how it would look, and obviously there's lots of points where this could go wrong. But working with a provider, actually, that can't go wrong because actually you're not holding any of that liability
You're
yourself
not
as a
holding
business.
any of that liability, and the person is legally employed in China, right?
Yeah,
So that EOR provider is paying their salary, contributing to the social insurances and housing funds, paying the income tax. So it's a controlled space, right? And ultimately, the EOR provider, if you want everything to be properly seen, is also then paying the disbursements, right? Reimbursing any disbursements that were generated for that individual. So it's kind of like a whole package solution when you're talking about payroll. And then don't forget the legal responsibility, right? So
Yeah.
as an EOR provider, the biggest downside to offering this service is the legal responsibility and potentially being taken to labor arbitration because the person is not happy that they've been terminated or they're not happy with the employment structure. I mean, there could be so many things that pop up, right?
Yeah.
And because the EOR provider is signing the employment contract and is the legal employer of record, they are the ones who will then be going to the court or going to
You
arbitration
hold the responsibility, I
and
guess. I
help
guess that's
and
why you're paying for that
for the
service, that
service.
somebody else takes that off of
Exactly.
you.
And I
Okay. And
think
so
this is
when,
also why you need to understand the service fees because a lot of people are sort of like, why are, and this is just a general consensus. I mean, you're looking at service fees for one employee of around 500, and I've seen some companies charging up to $1,000 a month per employee for just one employee, right?
yeah. But there's
Um,
there could be potentially a lot of risk involved, and actually that takes
absolutely.
all of that stress and worry and potential issues
Absolutely.
away from
Absolutely.
you
Now,
as
in
a
my
business.
case, as an EOR provider, I have been to arbitration many times. I mean, arbitration is not the right word. I would probably say labor mediation. So if the employee files a complaint, it's to the labor bureau, and the first step is a mediation process for
Yep.
that labor officer to understand what are the issues between the employer and the employee, and then
Hmm.
to mediate the process for a final conclusion, right? And hopefully then a
Hmm.
settlement is made right there and then. Um, I mean, it's part of our job to take on that responsibility. It's really not fun. And ultimately, the client who is looking to have this employee should be paying for that time spent,
Yes.
that service, and for
Yeah.
those terminations. But again, that is a risk from the side of the EOR provider, whether the client actually ends up paying for that or not. But this is also why EOR providers ask for deposits, which is a
Yeah.
certain amount
Okay.
of salary, monthly salaries, in case of this type of termination.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. And so, um, you look after all of that stuff, and you don't have to worry. The business, say I'm the business, I don't have to worry about any of that. But
Exactly.
then, when it comes to the actual employee, like, could we pick anybody? Could it be that actually I want someone part-time, but they're an expat that's living in China, or do they need to be an actual Chinese employee and
So
it
that's
needs
a
to be
really good
full-time?
question. I think different EOR providers would have different company policies, right? I think
Yeah,
for us, our company policy has always been no part-time, right? We want to hire full-time employees.
yeah,
Um, so the employment itself is full-time, whether they actually then work 8 hours a day, who can track anyway in this remote working lifestyle that we're all living,
yeah.
but it's a full-time contract, right?
Hmm.
Um, the tendency nowadays is that companies will localize and want to hire just mainland Chinese employees.
Okay.
Does it mean that I can't hire foreigners? Not at all. I can. It's just we have to go through a work permit application in order for them to be able to work and reside in China. And
Okay.
this is just never a guarantee, right? I
No.
can't 100% guarantee that the Labor Bureau will issue a work permit and that the
Yeah.
Immigration Bureau will issue a residence visa.
Yeah. And I'm guessing this is something that would then take longer, cost more money,
For a
et cetera,
foreigner,
et cetera.
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. But it is possible, but it's just not something that is
It's
as
just not
simple.
guaranteed. It's not, it has to be really thought through. And getting work permits for foreigners nowadays, there's a score system and there's kind of a criteria list that you have to look at and see where you are in the scoring of each of these criteria.
Okay.
And then it's, are you a talent A candidate, a talent B candidate, a talent C candidate? Generally, people will always fall under talent B. Um,
Okay.
but the higher the score you get, the easier it will be to get your work permit and
To
your
get the
residency.
work permit. Okay. So generally speaking, as an EOR provider, the you're looking at local candidates, full-time local candidates
Yeah, I
rather
mean,
than
that's just the
expats.
trend generally now.
Yeah.
I just read an article last week from a legal friend of mine in Shanghai who gave the stat that there are approximately 90% of all foreigners in Shanghai have left.
Wow, that's a
So,
a big stat.
so that is a big stat. So the tendency really is that people are localizing their businesses, right?
Yeah.
And that's the tendency. But again, EORs can do both, right? It's just
Yeah.
what is the strategy of the company?
And so I come to you and you've onboarded incredibly. You will manage the offboarding of
Well, I
those
think the
people.
onboarding is an interesting aspect. So as an
Yeah.
EOR provider, I'm obviously onboarding on the payroll side of things, but it
Okay.
doesn't mean I'm onboarding the staff in terms of. So for the onboarding of employees, I just wanted to mention that, we do the onboarding in terms of payroll and HR compliance issues, but we're certainly not doing the onboarding of the actual job responsibilities. And I think this is something that's really important, is that although we're taking legal responsibility and we're the employer of record, the company still has, company XYZ still has the obligation to take care of the staff, right? They are
They
ultimately there
manage them.
and manage them and do also their onboarding in terms of what the responsibilities are, what are their KPIs, and all of these different aspects.
Okay, yeah. So none of that is left with you. Yours is just like the legal obligations around the employment. It's not the actual day-to-day management or
Exactly.
anything like that. So if the employee has a query, they go to the business. They don't go to you.
Correct. And if they have
Okay.
a query about their social insurance, housing fund, income tax, they come to us.
They come to and they know that. Okay. And so then again, when it comes to say I've decided actually this isn't right for my business, we need to terminate this, is that when you kind of step back in and you look after the termination and offboarding process with them?
So I think again, every EOR provider will be a little bit different. So I still think that the client should take responsibility and do the termination themselves, because this is up to ultimately their business strategy. So
Yep.
in an ideal scenario, we are all on that call, where the person and or vis-a-vis, where the company is explaining the business strategy, the business goal, and
Yep.
that the staff will be terminated, and as a consequence, the company has also terminated Woodburn services for that, um, and and then it starts the termination negotiation, if you will, right?
Okay.
One of the tendencies we've seen is that, with the economic climate and the slowdown we're seeing in China, it's not so easy to find jobs. And
No.
employees are going to try and negotiate for higher compensation. So there are standard termination compensation regulations you need to abide by. And then
Okay.
it's up to the employee whether they ask for more or not, and whether you as a company decide to give more. We will always go by the standard, but it's also up to the client to decide, actually, I really liked them. They did such a good job. I want to give them more because maybe in the future, who knows, I want to
You never
contact them
know.
again, right?
Yep.
It's also on what terms do you want to leave that relationship, right?
Yep.
So um, we've just noticed that a lot of employees in the last 6 months have been negotiating and wanting a little bit more for.
Yeah, they have a little bit more power and
Exactly, and
able to ask.
they're trying, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
if you don't
I
ask,
think
you don't get.
exactly, exactly, and I think if I have been to quite a few labor bureau mediations in this regard, where the client's like, I mean, they're just asking for an absurd amount. We're not going to give that,
Yeah.
and so the question is, okay, do we find a balance? What are you willing to pay? What are you willing to accept? And then, ultimately, sometimes you have to go to the labor bureau and make that negotiation and discussion and
Yeah.
get settled with it.
Yeah. I have one final question that has kind of just come to mind talking about all of this. And so my business does really, really well. You're great as an EOR provider. but actually I've decided now we've gone through the incorporation process and like my business is completely set up. I really love these employees that I've got via you, but actually I'd quite like them to be in-house now. Like
Yeah.
I want to actually employ them myself.
Yeah. So
Is
that's
that possible?
absolutely. So basically, these employees then file a resignation with us,
Yep.
and then we go through that termination closure. I think what you need to understand is that it could very well be that these employees try then to renegotiate because they're signing brand new contracts
Yes.
under these new
Yeah.
entities. I mean, if it were me, I would say, okay, can I have 2% more? Can I have 5% more?
And also, I guess they know that you, as an employer, they are paying you a fee uh, to be
Well,
there for of record. So
I think a lot of them don't know what that fee is,
no,
right?
but they know there's some wiggle room there that they're not
Maybe,
paying
maybe.
you.
But I mean,
Yeah,
again, like you said earlier, Claire, if you don't ask, you don't get,
you don't
right?
get. No,
Right.
exactly.
But
Yeah,
so I think that a lot of companies are like, yeah, we'll just do a transfer. I'm like, be
and it
prepared for maybe a bit of a negotiation, right?
yeah that it doesn't work quite so simply as that. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And so absolutely you can do it, no issues. I just think from a resume perspective, I would probably also state in those new contracts that the business relationship started on the date with the EOR provider.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask. So actually, if they have got and I would call it a CV or it's a resume, they on there would they have to legally write that it was Woodburn that they were employed by?
Legally, they should write that, even though ultimately they're not working for Woodburn, right? They're not
Yeah.
working. So, I mean,
Okay.
you can't expect a mechanical engineer who's working for services. It wouldn't make sense in their CV. So
No, I
let
guess they
them,
could probably note that in their CV that
well,
actually,
I mean, if it was me, I wouldn't put Woodburn. I would put the actual name of the company, right?
okay,
Um, but that the starting relationship began at the point
when you
with the
first
EOR
started.
provider.
Okay, and then I mean, it's probably not one for this conversation, but then I guess that would impact like with the company, like they've however many years service they've
Exactly,
had. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Um, and then again, it's up to the companies to decide whether they want to do that or not. I think that's just fair, right? I mean, you've decided on that original business model. You have gotten candidates to accept it. Do
yeah,
what's right by them, right? I
yeah,
mean, we're all
yeah,
people, right? And I think we
yeah,
all want something fair. Um,
definitely.
so I think when you even offer that, they might not even have thought about it. I think it's a great thing to be able to offer to them to say, look, in the contract, we're going to write that our relationship started on XYZ date, but
Yeah,
that the formal employment begins on 1st of January, whatever is the date.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um,
yeah,
I think from this conversation, it just shows that actually this is an incredible way to kind of dip your toe into the market
absolutely. Absolutely.
before
It's a great
making
interim
massive
solution.
investments.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And, if I look at my own client base of clients who are choosing the EOR service, many of them are in different situations. One of them, um, they've already got 6 employees on the EOR. My threshold generally is I say to clients, the EOR service really is an interim solution. At some
yeah,
point, you should figure out whether you're committed to the market or not. And my threshold is saying by the second or third employee, you should know
yeah,
whether you're moving or scaling or
definitely.
not, right?
Yes.
So this one client has 6 employees already on the EOR system, EOR business model. And the issue is the board of directors just can't come to a conclusion about setting up a company in China yet.
Okay. But there's no laws or anything in place to say they can't have more.
No,
So they could,
no,
and there's nothing in place to say they can't carry on this way
absolutely not.
indefinitely.
Absolutely not.
It's just
But
that for
it's such an
employees
expensive, it's also an expensive business model to maintain,
to keep going for a long
especially
period of
a
time.
larger amount of employees versus having your own entity and just doing the payroll in-house or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
moving that along. So at some point, there's also weigh out the cost of the EOR provider against running your own company, right? In terms of
Yeah.
finance, administration, and HR
I
issues.
guess for them, the right now, it's I guess it's a bit of a comfort blanket
Totally,
that
it
they
is.
have this, that they don't need
Absolutely,
to,
absolutely,
and they're used to it. It's working well. Let's carry on for a while longer before we
absolutely,
make any big decisions.
absolutely. And then obviously you have those that, I even spoke with a client out of Scotland the other day who has their own entity in China. They started off with the EOR service and they haven't even switched the employee over. And the reason why they haven't switched over is because they're not quite sure about him. And they're
So
giving
they don't
him,
have the responsibility then,
and
I
so
guess.
they
It's
don't want
your
they
the
don't want the responsibility of dealing with the termination. And so they're using the next well, they're using the fiscal year 2024 to figure out whether he will stay or whether he will go, but under the EOR model.
yeah.
If they feel that he's somebody that will stay, then by 2025 they'll switch him over.
And if not, then I guess they go through the termination with the EOR
Exactly.
provider.
Yes, exactly.
So it could be
Um,
used a bit tactically then to,
it absolutely can be used strategically, and for the EOR provider, it's just they get their monthly service fee and that's
and
it,
yeah,
right? So it's a very flexible service, right? It gives you a lot of options to decide in which way you want to move in China. And I think it's a fantastic service to start off with, especially when you realize that you need people on the ground to support your business.
yeah,
And I think for us, the advantage also is that with our partner, we do this in conjunction with recruitment as well.
yeah. It's a wonderful package that you can offer. So you
Exactly.
don't have to worry about any of the stages. You can manage from beginning to end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for the headhunter, his biggest dilemma with China is the fact that he talks to companies who their first priority is to get somebody on the ground before they even have an entity,
Wow.
without realizing that it takes 3 to 6 months to set up the entity,
Yeah.
right?
So they need the service that
And
you
for
provide.
him, it's embarrassing to recruit somebody telling them the company will be set up 1st of June. So your first working day is 1st of June, and then it's mid-March and they haven't even started the process yet.
Yeah.
You know, as a
Uh-huh.
headhunter, you lose your value. So now obviously he's gone to the company and been like, you need an intermediary solution. You need to
Yeah.
properly hire. This is a senior management role, and it's embarrassing how you are
Yeah. That they're not
solving the
prepared.
solution, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's also something just to touch on. The EOR service is for any role, any hierarchy, any position in the hierarchy, whether you're talking about a general manager role or whether you're talking about a mechanical engineer.
Yeah. That and everything in between. It covers every type of role.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So I think we've gone through all the
I think so. I feel very
questions.
informed now, and like I think for me personally, I think if I was going to set up a business, it's an incredible way to be able to have that experience and
Yeah.
to progress.
And just focus on your business, right?
Yeah,
You're not worrying about any administrative compliance issues.
taken care of, which is
Yeah.
why it is an added cost, but actually the benefits really do
Way
cover
out.
that cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
completely.
Absolutely. Um, I still have clients who they have 10 employees in China and they have no formal entity.
Oh wow.
And from abroad, they're paying the salaries into the bank accounts. And the reason why they've reached us is because some of these employees are getting monthly salaries that are hitting the annual quotas for a currency exchange.
Oh no. So
And so
they
the
get
employees
it's a
are stuck with
problem.
US dollar, but they can't use it in China, right? They need to be
Yeah.
able to convert it. Um, and they've just found that to be the simplest methodology, but so much could go wrong, right?
Yeah, it
They
feels
could
quite
get
risky.
they could get denounced at any point in time by any of the 10 employees that they have. Um,
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, there was a client who used to have a Hong Kong company with people on the ground in Shenzhen. And at the end of each month, he would take cash out of his
Oh my
corporate account in
gosh.
Hong Kong, carry a briefcase of it, and then distribute the salaries in cash.
Wow. And I mean, obviously now that wouldn't be possible because obviously, I mean, especially here in the UK, to go and put that much money into your bank account with
Well,
cash, they
I mean,
want to know where it come from and
their trigger has been now, um, you needed now 2 suitcases, not suitcases, briefcases to carry the cash, right? Um,
yeah.
because they added staff, and when you keep adding, and they had an office with like 20, 25 people at some point. So now just imagine all of that.
Wow.
Um, and it just becomes risky. I mean, you're building such a sizable business and you're not doing it formally,
Yeah.
right?
It just feels like anything like it's kind of a bit like a game of Jenga. At any point someone could move a
Uh,
block and it could all come
uh,
tumbling down.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to highlight there's still companies out there that do this in China because they feel
No,
like they can get away with it, right?
yeah. But
Uh,
it feels risky for them as a business, but also as an employee, it feels risky. Like it doesn't feel stable for anybody.
well, I don't know. I think the younger generation nowadays, they don't, they're happy to get cash in their pockets. I think they don't care about the social insurance aspect. And
But then how did that, how, like if you were going to go, I don't know, you were paid your monthly salary, and then how do you get that into your bank without there being questions
I
asked?
think there are a lot of Chinese, well, I say this, but I think there are a lot of people who don't have bank accounts,
Oh, okay.
right? And then I also think, I mean, I say that, but then China's extremely digitalized where you do need a bank account to make payments and
Yeah.
things like that through WeChat Pay and Alipay and whatnot. Um, but when you are, I don't know, 23 years old, and I don't know, you're earning just 1,200 pounds, it's not like you're going to be checked.
No,
You're not the big fish that's going to be chosen out of a hat, right? And I think
no.
this is what people have been trying to get away with. And I don't know, like you said, it's like a Jenga. You just pull out one and everything can collapse. It's
Yeah.
risky.
It just takes
Risky.
that one
Exactly.
employee to complete, one person to,
One person to make it all fall down.
yeah,
Uh, so I do think it's really important to formalize the business. Make sure you're doing things appropriately, especially when it comes to compliance and administration. And just always remember, if you don't do it proper, these employees have so much leverage over you,
yeah,
right? I remember back in the day when my brother and I were taking over for my dad. My dad had an office in Shenzhen with a couple of quality control guys that were hired through there. And he had been not declaring the full salaries. So he was basically declaring half of the salary, then paying social insurance and income tax on that. And the other half was kind of given in cash. And in those
yep,
days, that's how it was kind of done.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, long story short, termination of these two quality control guys. They went to the Social Insurance Bureau and filed a complaint against us that we had not declared the full salary for them to get the social insurance. And very, very luckily, we didn't panic. We then came back to them and said, well, if we're going to take that route, you also haven't declared your full salary for income tax.
Yeah.
And so
Uh-huh.
you're going to also have to pay back now on the amount that
Yeah.
was declared, right? So it's kind of like a battle between these two things that we
Mm.
denounce you guys to the tax bureau, right?
Yeah.
Just like you could denounce us to the social insurance bureau. Um, and that's, you learn from your experiences. This is where when that happened, we're like, no, we're declaring full salaries. We're doing everything proper.
Yeah.
You just don't want to go through an audit, which is what happened with us. We then went through an audit
Yep.
where they went through the last 3 years worth of payroll slips,
Yeah.
ultimately, and payroll simulations. So, again, this falls on the shoulders and the burden falls on the EOR provider. But these are things that, it's a great solution for you to get rid of all of that. But once you have your own entity, these are things that you just also have to think about and make and
Yeah.
legalize.
But
Right?
I think for your first time doing it, it's great to have that first of all as a bit of a guide, even just that
Yes,
actually what actually needs to happen, what will be happening every month. Actually, you might not be doing it yourself now, you're paying another company to do it. But
yeah,
ultimately, if you decide that it's for you, this is what you're going to need to have in place.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Claire, I mean, we've pretty much
I
gone through
think we covered,
a
yeah.
lot of information, a lot of case studies and stories. But at least now people have an understanding of what the EOR model looks like. No, actually, there's one thing we haven't touched on, Claire, and I think that's really
Okay.
important, is also social insurances in China.
Okay.
Um, as an EOR provider, our company is based in Shanghai. If somebody is employed by our Shanghai company, that candidate, that employee is abiding by the Shanghai Social Insurance and Housing Fund. We can hire people that are based in Beijing and Chengdu and Chongqing. It's just those people would need to abide by the Shanghai Social Insurance and Housing Fund rates.
Okay.
Now, this then limits, obviously, the candidates, because a lot of candidates will be like, nope, I need to have my local social insurance and housing fund. They might say, we've just purchased a property in Beijing and I need the housing fund in Beijing to help contribute to my mortgage. Or, I've got a sick parent and I need my medical insurance to be in Beijing to support them, these types of things. So that will also limit the candidature, if that's the right word,
Yep.
finding people that would be willing to then work for you in Shanghai. Or obviously, there are much larger EOR firms that have that network throughout. So we also partner with EOR firms that have other offices, where then the social insurances and housing fund can also be localized. But I think this is a really important point to realize. Just in general, when you're doing recruitment, how you're negotiating with the employees, to raise this point as well.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Any questions you might have, reach out to us. Happy to help. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast and/or the YouTube channel, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. Now, can Woodburn help you? I am offering a free 30-minute call where we discuss the obstacles you are encountering on your China business journey and how perhaps we can help accelerate your success. The link to my diary is in the show notes. I look forward to speaking with you.